So, as you know, the West has been deplatforming RT left and right. The other day, DirecTV pulled the plug. My mom called me because she went to channel 321 on DirecTV. That's how I got it to remember it. And they just started pulling the plugs left and right. Now, my mom was kind of confused about this because she says, I can't believe they pulled this out. Why wouldn't they want to hear an opposing view? And not to mention, she loved the news desk. She loved the news segment, those little half-hour news segments they do. She thought it was unbiased. She thought it was fair. She liked the whole formula of when they're just going out and asking people. So she was even a little confused, and she thinks it's a little wrong they took it off the air, but it doesn't surprise her because we are in the age of censorship. So here's the Hollywood Reporter. It says DirecTV drops Russian-backed RT channel effective immediately. Not even, do not wait, do not pass go, do not collect $200, fam. Immediately.
Go to jail.
Go to jail. The next one, Microsoft to remove RT apps now to ban the Russian state-owned media ads. So they got that. Third one, Russian-backed RT channel to lose Sky TV slot in the UK within 24 hours. So that is effective already. They pulled the plug over there, and I'm hearing everybody complain about that and talk about that. And then you have Fox News. RT America continues to air as Europe, Canada shuts down affiliates of Russian propaganda network. See how they frame it, Russia propaganda network? And this is what we're talking about, fam. These are these neoconservatives who fell for the bullshit when it came to Iraq. You know, hearing all these people talk, I heard candidates that are conservative candidates that are running for office, right? They're not even a part of the establishment. They don't want to be a part of the establishment. They are even pro-war, anti-Putin, fam. And this is how you get the band back together. You get people to kiss and make up. You bring in that Romney, Dick Cheney, Lindsey Graham, Mitch McConnell fashion of the kind of like right-wing party. And they go along with the establishment Democrats who like Bob Menendez or Melendez, whatever his name is, the congressman from Jersey who's on every single pro-war bill out there. He's a co-sponsor. They get to wear their Ukrainian flag together and unite and dupe the people because this is what brings people together better, fam, than a good old war, especially with the number one James Bond villain on the planet, Vladimir Putin. To us, it's Klaus Schwab. To the idiots, it's Vladimir Putin, fam.
Yeah, they're creating their own Bond villain. And also, I mean, it's crazy how I'm getting, messages because I think Rachel Blevins talked about how she received threats and stuff when anytime she posted anything on RT. Niko posted how there's like bot accounts and there's a lot of them. And you can tell they're bot accounts because they're like new or they don't have any tweets. And I've talked about this before, but like they're threatening a lot of people. Like I'll get like direct messages that'll be like, coward, traitor, and some of them are from conservatives, and some of them are from the leftists who say I'm not supporting sovereignty. It's hilarious how much closer you got the so-called wannabe cappuccino commies and the neocons shaking hands and breaking bread when it comes to this conflict, because guess what? It's not about left or right. It's about understanding the information. It's about understanding the history and how that historical context applies to the reality that we're facing. They have more in common with each other than they think. And it's hilarious watching those attacks from these people. And it's also hilarious watching some of the people that are, anti-mandate fall for this too, and vice versa, that are like, because it's like, we're consistent. And like, we're consistently telling you, these trucker convoys, they're not the real problems. Yes, they might have a lot of right-wingers, whatever, but these people have the right to protest, and they're not the problem. The problem is a fascist state that is attempting to freeze our bank accounts. Yeah. They go and sanction Russia here, and some of these same people are like, yeah, that's great. Or some of the people that we've argued with, some of the other leftists are like, this is really bad. How dare they do this? But they're somehow okay with the Canadian government doing it to the truckers. Guys, have some fucking consistency. It is not hard to be on the right side of things constantly when you are consistent in what you call out.
We saw the tweet out there of me, Ben Rubenstein, and Steve in Vegas, and a sign that said, fuck Putin shots, $5. And all these people are into it. And I was speaking to some people, and I didn't ask them their political affiliation, but the way they were kind of speaking, they were out from Florida. I would have probably bet they voted for Trump, but yet they were still all about the F Putin thing. And it's kind of crazy, fam, because you did mention this before, and I think it's important when we would talk to a lot of anti-imperialists that were buying into the whole boop boop situation, we'd say, okay, the same people who own, Raytheon, Boeing, it's BlackRock. They also own Pfizer, AstraZeneca, all these Moderna, all these other companies and stuff. It's the same people. And they'd be like, oh, no, but this is different. And now you talk to some of those people who are anti-mandate, anti-boop boop and whatnot, and you say, the same people who own, Big Pharma own all these military industrial complex. It's the same people propagating this war. And they're like, oh, well, it's different. But it's crazy because it's like, it's like now you see some of the anti-imperialists who we were just mad at for buying into the whole bullshit. They're getting this thing right because they've been swimming in those waters. And I always say that the reason why people know certain things about certain subjects is when they're swimming in those waters, when they're looking at these subjects, when they're into these topics like we are for election integrity and foreign policy, then we understand what's going on. I mean, I said this before, when it comes to calling out BS, this should be a layup. If you've been paying attention, just a small amount to what's been going on in the Ukraine in 2014, a small amount, you should be able to say, this is BS over here. This is on Putin's doorstep. He has no choice. Maybe you can't justify it, but it has to be expected, especially when it's a Western-backed regime change war, when we have the receipts and then picking the next president as they're throwing the government out and then funding neo-Nazis. It should be quite simple. But my question to you is, fam, and if you can put it in your fam way, why is it important for us to have access to a channel like RT?
Well, I mean, it's as simple as for everything that we've been fighting for, everything that Julian Assange has fought for, the reason he is currently, still in Belmarsh. The fact is, you need to have a counter view, a counter narrative to the government. You need to have the people that watch and make sure that the government isn't exploiting and isn't lying and it isn't doing these things that it is doing. And unfortunately, the mainstream media in the United States is completely co-opted. It's completely controlled by the sectors of the government, as are social media giants like Twitter, Facebook, that have been, controlling anything that's coming out of Russian state affiliated media, as they call it. So if you don't have that, you're only going to get one narrative and one narrative only. And this country's already propagandized to think. I had one of my friends reach out to me recently and say, what, I'm trying to follow this, but I thought Putin was like invading Ukraine and trying to take over the entire Europe. That's what she said to me. And I'm like, no, that's wrong. Here, let me explain to you why this is wrong. And then we just got into the conversation and she was like, I can't believe this, blah, blah, blah. You're right, they do lie. All it takes is having these conversations with people. But if they don't have access to that information or a counter view, they're all going to be propagandized, and we're already screwed in this country to that level. This is why they can manufacture consent for war. This is why you see all these idiots with Ukrainian flags everywhere, because it's already so saturated with mainstream media. People like us, we get demonetized, we get taken down, we get shadow banned, we get all of these things, and they want us to stop. And so RT was a network that had a lot of people like us on, a lot of people that were, speaking against imperialism, having the Eastern perspective, the non-Western perspective. And when you take that away, you should ask yourself why they're so hyper-focused in censoring this content coming from Russia, especially if you were suspect about the pandemic narrative. Yeah. Why are you going to allow this? This is yet another psyop that's happening where they're trying to turn people against an entire group of people, against all of Russia, framing these people as evil. Russians are getting their restaurants destroyed, their books destroyed. I mean, this is the epitome of what I think is modern day book burning, because we don't have the same, people don't read prolifically as much with a literal book, but they watch videos or they read things online. And when you censor that content, you're burning books. Yeah. And you're burning books at an unprecedented speed, because we are now living in a technocratic corporate state where these people hold the most power. And it's only going to get worse from here. Yeah.
A lot of people would ask me, well, Pasta, how do you justify watching RT or kind of showing RT clips on your show or talking about RT when they are somewhat financed by the Russian government? And I've said this before, because listen, when it comes to RT, they don't have to give instructions. They don't have to tell people what to do. All they take is disenfranchised news people that were told by the establishment that they can't speak their mind, that they can't say what they want to say, and they found a home in RT. All RT had to do was go, okay, provide a platform, and that's it, and step off, because they already understand that they're hiring anti-establishment people who are going to give a different perspective than the perspective that's given on our daily news, our mainstream media news and stuff like that. And what does it hurt? When you're telling other people that they can't listen to another opinion, you're telling them, no, this is the way you have to think. It's all about control at the end of the day, and that's what they're trying to do. They're trying to control you. It's like you talked about, fam, the imperialism of the mind, and this is a part of it right over here, because they have to completely control you. And God forbid you look at other points of views that aren't necessarily yours. We can't have that, because then you might not agree with our point of view. And don't get me wrong, it still works right now. We've talked about this before. The programming of being anti-Russian for a long time has gone on for quite some time. I've mentioned the movies, but it really does work, because I had this mindset growing up that Russia was the enemy. It's us versus Russia. It's us. Now they're trying to do it with China. And the beautiful thing about RT and the show Crosstalk right now, and I'm going to play three clips from Crosstalk. And I shared this video with you guys yesterday, and I encourage people, go watch this whole video, because there's so much information. When I found Crosstalk, I didn't even know it was part of RT. I didn't even know what RT was, but I was able to learn along with Kevin Zeese. I believe it's Popular Resistance, his
popularresistance.org.
Yes, yeah. And I was able to watch them, and I went back. And I was able to go back and watch all the 2014 crosstalks, right? And I learned so much. But here's the thing I did, fam, and I encourage people to do this, is when RT says something, or when the mainstream media says something, go look for yourself. Go find the receipts yourself. It's out there. A lot of the information that you want to clarify is out there, whether it be true or false, and you can find it. The only thing is Americans are so goddamn consumed nowadays, not just consumed with other forms of entertainment and reality TV, they're consumed with work, trying to put food on the table and keep the electricity on. So they're consumed in many ways that they just take what's given to them. And if you can eliminate RT and all these other voices out there, then you just have your propaganda, your messaging. It's almost like a Clockwork Orange in a way, the way they sit you down, force you to put your eyes open and watch their stuff. That's what they're doing. So this crosstalk that was on the other day, we have 3 great questions to talk about it. The name of the show is called Demilitarize and Denazify. And there are 3 great people on this particular show for this episode over here. We're going to break it down. And this is where I was able to learn about what happened in 2014 and go back. That's where I saw Mark Sloboda for the first time, and I fell in love. I was like, oh, look at Mark. Look at that hair. Look at that mustache. But he was great. And I love Peter, too. You know how I feel about Peter and whatnot. I like the whole mentality of crosstalk, of bringing in opposing views and sitting down and talk. Just sit down and let's, because that's what this country was built upon, right? I mean, I know you might have not heard it when you were growing up, but I used to heard, like, this is a country where you can hate the country, and it's okay to hate the country because it's America. You're free to think about what you want, to think what you want to think, to talk about what you want to talk about. That's the beauty of America. Well, it's going the opposite way now. We're moving away. We're becoming more and more fascist, more authoritarianism is slipping into our daily discourse. So let's take a look at this. This is the first one, fam. I'm going to encourage everybody, go and watch this whole episode of RT. And the question I want to ask and pay attention to is, he's going to talk about the demilitarize and the denazify, and we're going to go over that stuff. But in your mind, fam, my question to you is, and watch this clip and then you can give me the answer, is and was Ukraine a failed state since 2014? Take a look.
But the denazification element is really important, because that is completely omitted from the Western narrative, and it has been for a long time. The West always back radicals. They back radicals in the Middle East. They backed radicals in Ukraine, unfortunately, from World War II to the present. And this is a very complex political analysis that no one will ever undertake in the mainstream media, nor will they ever mention it. No politician will ever mention it as well. And the United States knew exactly where the fault lines were, and they aggravated those time and time again in order to manipulate the political situation in Ukraine, and most notably when Victoria Nuland and her team were over there during the Obama administration. This is when it really inflamed, and they really went for the kill, as it were, in terms of backing a violent coup in 2014. And at that point, Ukraine ceased to be a liberal democracy, because a liberal democracy means that you can have people from different ethnic ethnic groups and they have equal representation under the law. So at that point, you could argue that, you know, from the 2014 Maidan coup, backed by the United States and the EU as well, and NATO member states, then Ukraine becomes a failed state at that point. When you deploy the military, basically to attempt to ethnically cleanse or to put down a rebellion based on race or ethnic origin at that point, and then you lose control of parts of your country for similar reasons politically, like in the Crimea, you're a failed state technically at that point, and it's only a matter of time before you continue to come apart at the seams domestically, or your neighbors will help in that process as well. This is not exclusive to Ukraine and Russia in this sense. This is really all over the world throughout history, or at least the history of the post-Westphalian nation-state era. So I don't see this as a surprise, but there's no context. The background, the coup, none of it. And the fact that the Minsk Accords were completely sabotaged for 7-8 years is never mentioned. No context, no background, no history, nothing. All you get is this is Vladimir Putin and he's the next Hitler, and this is the Sudetenland. That's all you get right now in the Western media and by politicians. And it's just incredibly arrogant and incredibly manipulative, and I would say really shameful, the treatment this is getting, especially from Western politicians who are grandstanding right now, pointing the finger, wagging the finger, and the media that will not allow any.
Pam, tell me your thoughts. Is it a failed state, number one? And your thought about the way they kind of note, they don't talk about any of this situation when it came to 2014, how there was a coup. They're not allowed to. And once again, just like the situation with the pandemic, here is the mainstream media carrying weight and water for the ruling elite. No.
Yeah, I mean, this is, everything he said, we've talked about on this show, which I think is really awesome that, you know, we were echoing the same thing without knowing it. I just saw this particular crosstalk and I felt like I wasn't crazy because there's only been a few of us talking about this from this context. Like when I say, like, you know, a lot of people are hyper focused on Putin. I'm like, do you understand like the historical context of how we got here? People don't want to hear it. They just want to focus on Putin is invading Ukraine. How dare you defend that? That's it. And it's this propaganda. It's this gigantic gaslight by the United States, by NATO, by their Western media propagandists. And he's absolutely right. You cannot have a democracy when you had a coup backed by a superpower, by an empire that didn't just back, but funded militarily and of course, monetarily funded. And Victoria Nuland didn't just back this. She literally was on the phone saying, I don't want this guy. I want this guy.
Yeah.
So it's way more than that. So at that point, then Ukraine ceases to be its own independent and sovereign democracy and becomes a proxy colonial existence of the US and NATO, which is what Russia saw. And they had said a long time ago that this was their red line. And if the United States and NATO were to cross this red line, that would be a problem and they would have to respond. They knew, the CIA knew. And since 2008, they knew that was, at least since then, that was a red line, that if that were to ever happen and there was an eastward expansion of NATO, that would be something that Russia would do, that they would respond. And so what they're doing now is they're gaslighting and putting the blame on the victim instead of the actual perpetrators, because they are the perpetrators. This is why you see such like gallant and such like fervent like hatred for Putin and Russia, and how they're doubling down on everything because they were the ones that were behind the coup in Maidan in 2014. And they can't, what are they going to do? Hold themselves accountable? Come on.
Well, you think that one politician would pull him out, right? You think that Thomas Massey or Rand Paul would be screaming this thing. Nobody's talking about the fact that they supported a coup in 2014. And because of it, Putin used the term genocide, but there's over 14,000 people who were slaughtered in the Donbass region and stuff. And it was all Western military grade weaponry given to neo-Nazis. And not neo-Nazis, fam, that are just like, oh, I think they're a Nazi, like a Trumper, they call them Nazis. These are hardcore neo-Nazis who admit that they're neo-Nazis, fam.
Yeah, exactly.
And the next slide, it says, is Ukraine a poor country? We've talked about it so many times. And it's the findings revealed in 2020 that Ukraine, 45% of the population will be living in poverty. What is the second poorest country in Europe? According to the World Bank, Ukraine is one among the most poverty-stricken countries in Europe. The average GDP per capita there is $33,425 per year. You're not going to buy a lot of food with that, fam, whatsoever. But I just also want to talk about the fact is that these neo-Nazis, once you give them a gun, once you give them power, once you give them money, and once again, it is a small minority, but it's a very powerful minority. Okay, because that minority is not only inside the government, talking about inside the Ukrainian parliament, they're inside the military, they're inside the police, they have their own militias, and they are not the best sounded people out there, fam. They're not all put together upstairs, if you know what I mean, fam.
Yeah.
So this shows right here, no peace in the Donbass. This is when, President Zelensky told them to stand down. They wouldn't listen to them. They're like, no, I'm not listening to. Ladies and gentlemen, you have to read the subtitles. We're going to get about a minute and change into this one right here. Take a look, and you can see the Azov battalion. It's saying, screw you, go scratch Zelensky. We're not pulling out. Go ahead, us.
Новый лозунг снова в рифму. Житие украинских националистов в звучных строчках. Коротко, понятно, антураж привычный. В масках при оружии бойцы батальона Азов огласили демарш президенту Зеленскому, демилитаризации и Минским соглашениям.
Если свою прямую обязанность защищать каждый сантиметр украинской земли не выполняет президент, власть, то выполним еще раз мы, ветераны-добровольцы. Мы даем слово, что мы никогда не покинем наш последний блокпост.
Так называемые отряды добровольцев самовольно заняли позиции вблизи Золотого. Там и в населенном пункте Перово сегодня должен был начаться обратный процесс – зеркальный отвод войск. Первый пункт деэскалации конфликта на Донбассе по инициативе украинской стороны вновь сорвался.
Несколько дней назад были обстреляны населенные пункты Золотое и Петровское. Но, насколько вы помните, наше решение про развод войск станет возможным только после того, как в течение недели на этих участках будет сохраняться мир.
Способствовать которому, по-видимому, должен нацкорпус, армия и отряды украинской полиции, будучи в шаге от мира, лишь укреплять.
Where's the squad on that, fam? Where's AO Sizzle on that one, fam?
Putin is an invader. He's a maniac. That's the narrative. Putin is crazy. That's all that. They don't talk about this. It's as if it doesn't happen.
And you see the Azov battalion. They're at the freaking in the region of Donbass over there, firing and killing people. Right? Zelensky tells them to pull away, and they're like, "No, we're not going anywhere."
He can't control them. Zelensky is like Mark Sloboda put it, a prisoner in his own existence. He doesn't have any power. The power is within these factions. Yeah. And that's what people need to understand. Just because he's Jewish doesn't mean that he's got the power. And we're going to talk a little bit more about that later. Now, that doesn't mean anything.
And fam, there's a bunch of people, well, they didn't really know they were supporting Nazis. Maybe they were just kind of nationalists. No, they thought, and you know what I'm saying? And literally supporting and standing up. So when you're wearing the Ukrainian flag, AOC, Cori Bush, and Rashida Tlaib, just know who you're supporting. And the fact is, fam, I think a lot of people think that Nazis are just kind of like, they're only in a certain class when it comes to Americans. In other words, Americans, we hate Nazis more than anything because they stand against our way of life. No, Russians, communists that fought for so many years. Remember, we lost maybe 1 million people in World War II. There can be, the numbers are anywhere from 20 million to 40 million.
Yeah.
Russians were lost. So Russians, because can you imagine the Americans are now funding Nazis to take over the country, to be part of Ukraine, to go on the border of Russia.
We live in a fucking cartoon.
This is ridiculous. And people are buying this. So when people go, well, maybe they didn't know they were Nazis. Here's a little Canadian clip of a Canadian a gentleman who went and met with these people. He explains to you, no, the Azov battalion, they wear who they are on their sleeve. They tell you who they are. Take a look at this little quick clip.
We probably don't want to be rubbing shoulders with organized far-right militant groups that have, that are very open about it. I mean, you could go right now and view on YouTube their videos of their trainings, the very forward symbolism. They're not hiding this stuff.
Canadian diplomats and soldiers in Ukraine took an unusual meeting in June of 2018, one that's now coming to light. It was a meeting with one of the paramilitary units raised to fight off the Russian invasion of Ukraine's eastern provinces. One problem, that unit, the Azov battalion, has been linked to neo-Nazism, and the Canadian military knew.
Велику, могутню і соборну. Слава нації!
An Ottawa Citizen report says Canadian forces in Ukraine produced a briefing in 2017 saying members of the Azov battalion identified themselves as Nazis. But the June 2018 meeting happened anyway, with a Canadian forces colonel and diplomatic staff attending. The battalion published pictures on social media saying Canadian representatives expressed their hopes for, quote, further fruitful cooperation. In a statement, the Department of National Defense says they are strongly opposed to the glorification of Nazism and all forms of racism, racial discrimination, xenophobia, intolerance, and extremism, adding, our official position remains that we are not, nor will we be providing support to Azov and affiliated entities. Brad Galloway with the Center for Hate, Bias, and Extremism has studied the Azov battalion. He says that while some neo-Nazi groups prefer to be discreet with their imagery, the Azov battalion is more forthright. German news found members of the unit sporting SS symbols and swastikas, and Azov prominently places the wolf's hook and black sun, two symbols favored by the Nazis, on its crest.
Maybe there's a wing of them that want to tone it down a little bit so it's playable in North America. That could be one aspect of it, but I think with the way they're doing things over in Europe, I think it's as advertised.
Galloway says what concerns him most is the Canadian government underestimating the reach of groups like the Azov battalion. Similar to Canadians who join ISIS, Galloway warns that alienated far-right Canadians may see the Azov battalion as a chance to turn ideology into action.
Some risk I see is that guys giving up on the movement in North America and saying, well, we should organize and go to Eastern Europe where we can actually do something, we can make a difference. And that's I think a huge risk.
In Ottawa, Shaoli Lee, City News.
Fam, I have a question for you, and true or false, that America and its foreign policy, the American government supports some of the craziest ideologues out there not because they didn't know, but because they'll do their fighting and their bidding for them. True or false?
Absolutely true. It's convenient. The United States has already supported Nazis in the past during World War II, has hidden them, has covered for them, has put them in government. We have some of the most ardent fascists working in the surveillance state, in the intelligence community, and in our current government. So it is hilarious to me and completely just infuriating when I see a lot of the skinny jean left that is, again, like crying about Trumpers, crying about the Proud Boys, crying about the truckers from Canada. And of course, lo and behold, the Canadian government's hypocrisy. They're just our younger sibling, or, the more like the a little bit nicer sibling that pretty much has Medicare, they have healthcare, but other than that, they pretty much espouse the same type of neoliberal, global capitalist agenda. And then you have them feigning some sort of like outcry when it was the truckers and there was one Nazi flag and like someone brought a Confederate flag that was really sus, while the majority of videos that got completely ignored were all about peace and love and uniting and blah, blah, blah. But no, those people had to get their bank accounts frozen. And then Trudeau had to go on a tirade as to how they're so against racism and bigotry and blah, 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 while simultaneously turning away and pretending that the Azov battalion aren't proud Nazis. And I'll give them that. They're proud of it. They don't lie. They say, we've shown multiple videos on this show of how they blatantly say, oh, no, we're a small minority group. We're very powerful and we want to fight and we want these people out. They tell you who they are. And yet you have the entirety of the Western media from Europe to the UK to Canada to the United States blatantly lying about this. And you have the idiot lefties, emotional leftists, completely turning away and saying, it's just a minority, it doesn't matter. Again, I never ever want to fucking ever hear them complain about a right-winger ever again. Their ability to complain, their card to complain is completely kaput when they're supporting proud Nazis, neo-Nazis in this way. And also, of course, promoting imperialism via this way as well.
I think I'm going to go on Facebook tonight and troll some of those progressives who have the Ukraine flag and stuff and just mess with them.
Oh, God.
Put up pictures of the Azov battalion killing people and whatnot or something stupid because these guys are idiots, you know, to even stand there. And it's so crazy that, you know, this is, you know, that we're supporting this. Now they put more fuel on the fire. They're sending more aid there, lethal aid there, giving all the citizens AK-47 assault rifles. One of the questions that, you know, about is this a failed state is that, you know, I didn't point out in this particular episode, we pointed out before that when it comes to corruption, Ukraine is at the top of the list. When it comes to human smuggling, gun smuggling, they're up there. So pouring more fuel on the fire is just crazy. Even if it is a small minority, it is a powerful minority. And Joe Biden was all part of, like, you know, get the attaboy from Joe Biden. And this is the Biden-Obama regime of sorts back in there again. So we sure showed some Patrick Henningsen, who's amazing. Patrick, I hope you'll come on the show. I love your work. I don't even know if his Twitter's still up, if they didn't take it down or not, but just amazing work. Please come on the show with us and talk some more. He's a great reporter, independent media reporter. And next we have George Semswali, fam, from Budapest. Co-host and creator of The Gaggle. And this is something we've talked about on the show. And I didn't just want to point it out because I have a question when it comes to this situation, because we have said that no, the Biden, Obama foreign policy administration, all those people that come with it, the Ned Prices, the Antony Blinkens, the John Sullivans, the Victoria Newlands, the Jeffrey Pyatt's, all these names I'm mentioning, you should go look them up. These people are more dangerous than some of the people that Trump had in his administration, because at least Trump would keep hiring them and firing them and nothing would happen. These guys are ride or die from the get-go, have always been together. And are they more dangerous? And what does it mean for the future? So my question to you is, on this question is, fam, did the presence of the Biden-Obama regime back in power force Putin and Russia to act quickly? Here's George Semswali's take on it.
Works. And I think that because this post-Maidan Ukraine government has actually been in cahoots with the Democrats. I mean, remember, they got themselves involved in the 2016 election by openly backing Hillary Clinton, and they got themselves involved in the 2020 election, you know, in a way with the Hunter Biden and all of the what we knew about the Burisma thing, and then, you know, we had the coup again. You know, Ukrainians were involved in the coup against Trump. So this nexus of the post-Maidan Kiev and the return of the sort of essentially the Obama-Biden team may have triggered the Russians thinking, look, we need to act now, because, you know, in 2-3 years, it may well be too late. And I think that, you know, in terms of your question, what do the Russians want? Russians will not tolerate, you know, they've made it clear, they will not tolerate essentially an armed anti-Russia on their borders. I mean, this is what this whole state is just being created as a kind of NATO proxy, armed to the teeth, and it's driven by nothing else but animus toward Russia.
Fam, that's why they gave the Azov battalion all the power and the money and the weapons, because not because they thought they were the best for the Ukrainian people there, is because they were anti-Russian. And they knew that when they put them into power. But fam, your thoughts on, you know, what we've been talking about, and I've said this before, from Sergei Lavrov, right, the defense minister of Russia, very much so, like, I wouldn't suggest going into the Black Sea, Putin kind of, you know, standing off. We saw these same people that went back into power with the Antony Blinken immediately pivot to Russia. We need to go to war with Russia. We're going to start poking the bear. We're going to start putting Putin up as the worst, villain of all times and whatnot. Don't you think, fam, because the Biden, Obama foreign policy team got back into power, that they did force Putin's hand? And what does that really mean for the future of our foreign policy moving forward? Because when you hear Matt Duss talk about Ukraine, Matt Duss is online with what John Bolton says about Ukraine. It's almost the same.
I mean, I think this was always going to happen. I think they didn't want something like this to happen under the Trump administration because they had to frame Trump as the boogeyman that liked Putin, even though that wasn't necessarily the case. And even today, they're still framing Donald Trump and Putin as friends. They're saying, Trump said something positive about Putin because Trump is also controlled opposition when it comes to the right, because they have to make that side somewhat appealing to the other, to the people that are more on the populist side of the right. So they have to kind of promote that general thing. I think this was going to happen regardless because NATO continued to expand and they didn't stop, and they haven't stopped at all. Even during Trump's presidency, they haven't stopped. And so I think in a way it will seem like that they had no choice, but I actually think it's just right in line with what was always going to happen, because they knew from the beginning that Russia's red line, like I said, was the expansion of NATO at their border, and of course the ABMs and the anti-ballistic missile machines, and so then they're not they know once this happens, and then once there's some sort of radical notion, you could look back to West Asia and what happened in Afghanistan and pretty much parallel the two together, and especially also the creation of the radicals, the radical fundamental Islamist terrorists that the U.S. did. They know what they're doing. They benefit from it. And they were trying to create a state where there was a weakened Ukraine so they could come in and take over. And Russia instead precipitated their move and went over instead. And that's what they're really upset about, that they weren't able to carry out the step that they needed to actually complete the control of the country. If anybody wants to take control of Ukraine, it isn't Russia. It's the United States and NATO.
Yeah. And a lot of people feel that Putin was too hesitant. Putin was too hesitant. No. Putin was too hesitant, right? Yanukovych even say you have to intervene in the Donbass. These Nazis who are getting control over here, these paramilitary groups, they're really going to start killing ethnic-speaking Russians in the Donbass region right on your border. But Putin sat back. He said, let's go through the Minsk agreements, the Minsk Accords that was supposed to, talk about peace. And as soon as, Biden got back into office, right, you saw this kind of pivoting towards them. And for all those people who say, I don't really believe that American foreign policy would actually aid neo-Nazis directly and knowing it, yes, they would. I mean, these are the people who made the Mujahideen and lifted them up because they killed Russians, whatnot. They pretty much made ISIS and Al-Qaeda. Our government doesn't care who we fund. If it's in our geopolitical foreign policy interest, we'll give whoever money who will do our dirty work. And that's what the Azov battalion was and his Western Ukrainian government was. So remember in the beginning of Biden's term, he called Putin a killer. And Putin's like, really? Let's have a debate. Let's take a look.
The escalating tensions between the U.S. and Russia, Vladimir Putin now firing back after those sharp words from President Biden in my exclusive interview earlier this week. So Vladimir Putin, you think he's a killer?
Mm-hmm, I do.
So what price must he pay?
The price he's going to pay, well, you'll see shortly.
As we said, Putin is firing back. Let's get the latest from our senior White House correspondent, Mary Bruce. Good morning, Mary.
Senior.
Good morning, George. Russia this morning is furious and fighting back, even recalling their ambassador to the U.S., while Russian President Putin is now taunting President Biden with schoolyard insults. Asked about your interview and Biden's comments, the Russian president responded dryly, quote, "I would say to him, be well. I wish him good health," adding, "I say that without irony, without any jokes." Putin then going on to suggest that Biden is the real killer here. And now this morning, Putin is again challenging Biden to talk one-on-one live. I asked the White House about this, the press secretary almost laughing it off. It is an invitation that is extremely unlikely to be accepted. And while it's clear that Putin is trying to needle President Biden here, the White House says the president has no regrets about labeling Putin a killer. George?
Yeah, Mary, I offered to moderate that debate, but I'm not holding.
It's laughable that we would do that. You know how much adrenochrome we would need for that debate? Forget about it. Just kidding.
Yeah.
Just kidding. I love making that joke over there. It's so funny. U.S. Considering sending warships to the Black Sea amid Russian-Ukraine tensions. That's in April. You can see this building up time, fam. It was like slowly creeping. Like all of a sudden, we're paying attention now to Russia. The United States is considering sending warships into the Black Sea in the next few weeks to show support for Ukraine amid Russia's increased military presence on Ukraine's eastern border in their own country. As U.S. defense officials told CNN on Thursday, the U.S. Navy routinely operates in the Black Sea, but the deployment of warships now would send a specific message to Moscow, fam, that the U.S. is closely watching, the official said. The U.S. required to give a 14-day notice of its intention to enter the Black Sea under the 1936 treaty, giving Turkey control of the straits to enter the sea. It is unclear if the notice has yet been sent. And that's what Sergei Lavrov said. I would suggest you're not playing ball this time over here. And we've said this before from the get-go. Once this opened up, you see Putin telling Biden, you want to debate, my friend? Let's go. Lavrov telling him, I wouldn't do that. You saw a much more, I'm not going to play your game again. This particular regime, fam, Biden, who gave the attaboy thumbs up to Victoria Nuland, Jeffrey Pyatt, Antony Blinken, this particular regime, Russia understood who they were, and they said, we're not gonna be hesitant again. We're not gonna be lax. We're not gonna be passive. This time you mess around and find out what happens. That's what they said, fam.
Yeah. I mean, what else could he do? That's been my answer.
And by the way, just Turkey blocks the Black Sea passage for Russian Navy vessels as stuff is going on right now. That's what's happening today, those straits to get into the Black Sea. Now, don't get me wrong, ladies and gentlemen. That doesn't mean that Russia can't get into the Black Sea. They obviously have land on the Black Sea, whatnot, so they can get warships in there from Mother Russia. But at the end of the day, just to show you the NATO ally playing games and making sure they stand by their boys. And that's something to think about. And really, to tell you the truth, it doesn't make that much of a difference, right? They can recall some ships that are out in the ocean, bring them into the Black Sea. They already have vessels that can get in the Black Sea, but it just allows Putin to look to Erdogan and go, okay, you've been on my shit list anyways. Erdogan in Syria, okay. So it's just more tensions building up through NATO and whatnot. It's going to be interesting to see where Turkey ends up. Fam, a lot of people, when we talk about the Donbass, now this is Peter Lavelle over here because it's something he points out, and everything we've talked about. You see, what I'm doing is what I used to do when I looked at all the 2014 crosstalks when they were mainly focusing on what was going on in the Ukraine. I would look and see what they were saying. I would look to see what Kevin Zeese was saying, and then I would go find the receipts myself. Just what we just did right over here. Is Ukraine one of the most impoverished countries in the world? Go take a look at it. You know what I'm saying? All that stuff. So look at this part right here because this is important right now. Peter Lavelle talks about when the Western Ukraine government took over in 2014 from the support of the West and the U.S., they really went after ethnic-speaking Russians in the Ukraine, okay? They took away their party, which they had one of the biggest parties out there. They took away their language. Here's Peter Lavelle kind of laying it down.
Toward Russia. Patrick, if we look at Ukraine, particularly since the end of the Soviet Union to 2014, we had this kind of neo-Nazi element. I mean, those that know the story, this kind of Galician, very Russophobic mindset. But it was a minority experience. And then the Maidan amplified it and actually this Galician mindset replaced what was there before. And I think that for me is one of the great disappointments of coverage of Ukraine in the media, because you had before you had a wide, very, very wide variety of opinions about politics. We had the Party of Regions, the biggest party in the country, was banned after 2014. One of the largest parties in the country was the Communist Party. It was banned. So what they did was they confined political discourse and participation. And of course, people in the Donbass were excluded. They were disenfranchised, actually blockaded, and the government under Poroshenko killed up to 15,000 of them. Again, not much coverage in the media.
So, fam, I wanted to just kind of clarify some of the stuff he's saying because that's very, very true. They took away the party of legions, the party of regions, excuse me, not legions. Yeah, the Legion of Doom. The party of regions, right, which was one of the biggest parties in the country. Most of the people from the Donbass region were part of the party of regions. That was their representation. It was a communist party, whatnot. Well, when the Ukrainian government got in there, they removed that party. And you can see right here, this is an article that talked about the party of regions, including mandate leaders, power-based structure, membership and membership cards, whether the party is still active or dissolved in other parties, whether authorities are able to identify party of region members. State protection is available for those members targeted by militias or other forces. So people of the Azov battalion were actually, threatening people who were still trying to hold on to the party of regions with violence. And you can see right over here in this is part of the article, and it says right down below, if you look at the last part of the party of regions is now de facto disintegrated. The party is prohibited in many regions of Western Ukraine, and its local branches are therefore closed. They shut down this party when the majority of the people in the country was the biggest party were in this party, especially those people in the Donbass region and those ethnic-speaking Russians. They just disintegrated the party. So you could see what was going on right out of the gate, fam. That was in 2014. Boom. They went right at these people. They let them know, we're going to go after you. We don't like you. Because they don't. And that's what they did. Go ahead.
And also I just got to reiterate the fact that all these dumbass so-called communists that are supporting Ukraine's sovereignty because it's so based and they hate Putin, who's a right-winger, you're supporting the current regime that got rid of the Communist Party. Just so you fucking know. Yeah.
And they didn't only just try to get rid of their party, they try to get rid of their culture.
The people. Yeah.
Their culture. Ukraine region ban on Russia sparks controversy. Excuse me, let me read it again. Ukraine region ban on Russian culture sparks controversy. And here it is. And this is from Ukraine. The decision by a fiercely pro-Western region of Ukraine to ban Russian language arts from songs to books and films prompted widespread condemnation on Thursday, even as it remained unclear how it would be implemented. And they didn't know how they would implement it, but there was a sign like, we don't even want you to have your culture anymore. Lawmakers in Lviv's regional parliament on Tuesday overwhelmingly backed the open-ended moratorium on the public to use in any form of Russian language cultural product. The regional assembly said the moratorium would last until the end of Russia's occupation of Ukraine, referring to Moscow's annexation of Crimea and support for separatist regions in eastern Ukraine. So they're saying since Crimea decided to leave and go with Mother Russia, that they're going to punish all the people in the Donbass by taking away their language, by taking away, culture, whether it be in books or videos. Like they want to have a book burning party, fam. Get rid of all the Russian speaking books. So just so people understand, this is what went on. So when people go, oh, well, these people in Eastern Ukraine are just separatists and they're the ones causing problems. No, they were not. They were the victims. They are still the victims of today. 8 years it took Putin to go in there. So many people in his own country are like, what are you doing? You're letting these ethnic Russians get slaughtered. Here's the proof, ladies and gentlemen. And that's the beauty of crosstalk. So I am very scared if the United States is going to keep annexing RT because this is a different point of view. And like you said, like I said, excuse me.
Not annexing, but yeah. Getting rid of them.
Whatever they're doing, they're getting rid of their axing them, I should say.
Yeah.
It's scary. It's censorship. It's fascism. And we know what's what. All you have to do is go look for yourself, find the receipts for yourself. It's there in black and white.
And just the last video of this section is the video that Max Blumenthal posted. And Oz wanted to have it on. He said the most critical context you'll get on corporate media about the U.S. role in fueling the Ukraine-Russia conflict delivered in less than 2 minutes by Scott Horton. Scott Horton, obviously, has been on with you, right, Pasta, multiple times?
He's a good friend of Steve's. He's on Steve's show. I was on with him one time. I love Scott Horton, antiwar.com. He is a libertarian, but yeah.
Let's hear it.
Let's do it.
So, Scott, is it rich for you hearing Condoleezza Rice describe Vladimir Putin in this way. And Emmanuel Macron has echoed her sentiment, as have other world leaders. Is this a talking point, or has he really gone nuts?
It's a thin excuse. Condoleezza Rice is the one who tore up the anti-ballistic missile treaty and put dual-use missile launchers in Poland that can launch Tomahawk missiles tipped with H-bombs. And she's the one who brought the Baltic states right on Russia's border into NATO and promised to bring Ukraine and Georgia into NATO. This is all her fault. While she was working for George W. Bush, what's she going to do? Take responsibility? Of course she says it's because of his mental illness. Oh, something, you know what it was? He woke up on the wrong side of the bed this morning. And, you know, as far as, you know, I don't know who claimed this. The Washington Post said that Putin was promised that he'd win the war in a day. Putin said back in 2014 to an Italian diplomat, you know I could be in Kiev in 2 weeks. That was his threat. Now he's a fool who believed he'd win a war in a day. It took America 2 weeks, 3 weeks to sack Baghdad in 2003. We lost that war to the insurgency later on. But for Russia to be able to defeat Ukraine's state army is not in doubt. They have a 400,000-man army. The reality is that NATO expansion is the root of all evil here. Pat Buchanan and Ron Paul were right. We should have abolished NATO 30 years ago.
Yep.
Wow.
We should have abolished NATO 30 years ago. I mean, NATO is evil. NATO is an extension of the intelligence state. It's as simple as that. It's got to go. That simple.
Keeps the moolah flowing, fam. The money keeps rolling on in with NATO. So that's what it is. But that's that section.